which will be a little different in terms of the way we're going to do this, to really get into the depth of the New Zealand Historic and Classic Vehicle Survey. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Michael as the project director to lead into this in some detail. And then you're going to get to see the whole of the executive in action. That's Michael.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that. Right. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome you, apart from Gary. And I just really want to talk to those, to say thank you to those people and clubs and the donors who really have helped us with this survey in terms of financially putting some money up, because it's been a significant piece of work that we have done. The outcome is much better than we thought it would be. We bought it within budget, which is essential, but we've depleted our funds considerably. And so we've got to rebuild ourselves. And that's what this whole project is about. It's rebuilding the Federation in a different way for the future. And it gives us that opportunity to do that. So that's what I really wanted to just say. And more importantly, we've got, as Gary said, various members are going to drill down in aspects of the survey for the areas that they represent. So that will give you a much bigger picture that you probably haven't seen other than the summary report which we gave out. But there is a much bigger document of 150 odd pages which really drills down into the what the survey was all about. So I just want to talk a bit about some of the headline outcomes. I just want to briefly mention them. I don't want to get into too much detail now, but I do want to put in the fact that basically the total spend of historic and classic vehicles or sector in New Zealand is about, that's the annual, is $1.53 billion. So that's what we're putting into the economy each year. So it's an important number. We also, and taking it further down, averagely we do about 3,700 kilometres a year in our historic and classic vehicle. And the spend, which is important, and sometimes you probably don't want to tell your wife about it, is $6,355. And that's from the spend, insurance, running costs, servicing, etc. And the important one, I suppose, really is that the 52,500 is the average value of a historic and classic vehicle. Now that is a number that's come out from a lot of work that the people who did the survey, did the analysis, came up with. It might seem a lot, but if you start to look at the auctions that are occurring around New Zealand with classic and historic vehicles, you're certainly getting figures well in excess of that. So that's the second point I wanted to make about the final report outcomes. Interestingly enough, the Australians have just done a survey in Australia through the Australian Historic Foundation, and some of the numbers there correlate with what we've got. For instance, the fact I mentioned was the annual spend of 1.53. Theirs is about $9.6 billion. So it relates to the fact that they're an economy or a population that's 5 times bigger than ours, and so that it sort of relates. So it made us feel reasonably happy about our numbers relative to theirs. So that's what the Australian survey is important to, from our perspective, is that they have picked up on the fact that there is this sort of thing going on. And importantly, I just want to talk about the British Historic Vehicles Federation as well. We've done work with them. They've helped us with our survey in a number of different ways, which has been really helpful. Their view about it is that it was a very good piece of work that we did, and some of it they're going to use in their future surveys, which they do every 5 years. And so it was good to hear that from them. Can you go to page, please? What I just want briefly talk about is the pleasure of owning a classic and historic car. And perhaps it really is almost as important as buildings and art, in fact. And so you want to sort of, we're trying to extend it out a bit in terms of where we see these things going. And we are the caretakers of these machines, and then they go pass on to other people or whatever, to family, depending what happens. But also that we are, the hot rod scene is a vibrant scene, and that's another component of the whole of the classic and veteran cars. And they're actually part of New Zealand's motoring history, right from the early 1900s or even the early 1900s. And so I think that we need to see them in a light that they're preserving it, and it's part of our culture, and we need to continue to be able to do that in the future. Can you go to the page, please? So what I just want to talk about is this pleasure of ownership. It's actually about the creativity of owning a car and working on restoration and customization and maintenance. Those are all aspects that we do get our hands dirty about using them. The heritage is actually a nice extra part of it, about the fact that you actually have a piece of heritage in your garage and you're preserving it. It's the putting on the events and being there and having your car there and people coming past and saying what a great vehicle it is and asking you about it and talking technical issues where you want to. So that's important. It's the social aspects of it, the fact that you're with like-minded people and you're involved in an area that you have an interest in. And then there's the connection, really. It's the pleasure of connecting with my family and my history. So that's another one, because there are a number of vehicles, obviously, that have been handed on to various members of the family over the years. And to some people, it's fulfilling a dream. It really is the ownership of it and keeping it, and something that they've done. You always hear about the stories, certainly of cars that I've heard about, that they had this car when they were in their early 20s, had to sell it because they were getting married and they needed the money to buy a house or even a more sensible car. So those are the sort of things that come out of it. So fulfilling a dream is important. Can you go to the page, please? And what I really want to ask you is, are we hitting the right buttons with the survey? Do you think it's actually making a difference to you? Does it give you a better understanding of what the whole thing is about? Because it is important for us, particularly if we go to do a new survey in about 5 years' time, then we will be wanting to get some comparisons. But I'd like your comments. We've got a couple of questions I'm happy to answer before we move on to the next person. Anyone? But yes, sir.
So, sorry, Chris Hogg from the Ferrari.
Yes, Chris.
Well, congratulations to the team that put the survey together. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. It's one of the few things that the entire club that I belong to, all members, or many members, responded to. Normally they won't even respond to an email, so it was engaging. Well done.
Thank you.
I think the results of any survey is going to be very difficult for us to say whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, in that what we need to be using the survey for, and I'm sure this was the initiative in the first place, is to make change.
Yep.
Right. So the fact that we have proven that the clubs generate X dollars into the economy, the fact that there are these many members, that is and can be and should be used, as Harry indicated at last year's meeting, to influence government. Yeah. And we need to be doing things like 12-month warrants, whatever. Yeah. But it's the actions as a result of the survey that are going to be important to us all moving forward.
Thank you, Chris. I totally agree with you, and that's what this session is about. And you'll see some papers this afternoon about how is the Federation going to respond to the needs of the survey and what we need to do going forward as well. Hate that word, going forward. Sorry, I've used it. Anyhow, does anyone else want to? Yeah.
I thought the information that came back from the public survey, right down to, do people with classic cars, respect other road users and any past and doing things like that.
Yeah.
to me, that was really interesting. And, you know, overlay that with the demographics that you brought out in the survey.
Yep.
You know, that gives me hope that there'll be new generations of Kiwi enthusiasts who will say, yes, you know, I'm going to get into it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, we do too, because, you know, a number of us are getting much older and there are less interest in older cars in future generations. So what's going to happen to some of those older cars? Do they go back overseas, which is a heritage item that's gone from New Zealand forever? So there are a whole lot of issues there that we obviously are going to have to look at for the future. Okay, that's no more questions.
That's great, Mike.
Right, well, I'll hand it on now to Chris Dyer. Thank you.
There you go.
Chris, get rid of this, the chair there. It's preventing you from standing behind you. But yeah, just chuck it away.
That's
It's preventing you from standing squarely in front of the microphone. That's it.
Morning, everybody. My name's Chris Dyer. As I said before, I've been involved with vintage veteran cars since I left high school, which was probably over 50 years ago. I've been a member of the survey team, and well, I've travelled over most of New Zealand in those cars. Now, the VCC defines veteran motor vehicles as constructed prior to 31 December 1918, and vintage as motor vehicles constructed between 1 January 19 and 31 December 1931. But the NZTA have a slightly different definition. The veterans are the same, but the vintages are manufactured on or after 1 January 1919, or are at least 40 years old the day it was registered. We'll try and use the VCC definition if we can. From the Ministry of Transport data that shows there are 167,322 vintage and veteran, that's veterans over 40 years old, the NZTA definition, in the fleet, of which 634 are registered as veterans. However, page 95 of the FoMC report states there are 745 veterans and 5,924 vintages, registered and unregistered. My veteran has a VIC number of 999, so there's an awful lot in there that are floating around somewhere. From the report, we see that these travel on average, according to the Ministry of Transport, 2,850 k per year. And page 16 of the FoMC reports also says owners of these cars spend an average of $4,800 per year for insurance and fuel. Excuse me. And this number includes vintages up to the Second World War, which may confuse things. Vintage and veteran owners are on the average in the older age bracket, according to our survey, 55% are over 70. A lot of them probably getting as old as their cars now, and have mainly owned their vehicles for a long time. And again, mainly influenced by their parents. However, my father was one of these. What do you bring a more shit like that home? That's the only encouragement we have got to it. The survey shows most New Zealanders viewing vintage and veteran vehicles in a positive light, with most agreeing that they should be kept on the road. Also, most agree that they show courtesy to other users, and my experience is that this is reciprocated by other motorists. In my 50-odd years of motoring, I've been involved in very, very few disagreements with other motorists, usually in impatient small truck drivers. That's drivers of small trucks. The long-haul truck drivers are usually very patient and understanding. So, thank you. Next one. Other page. Yeah. Most will do their own servicing as they build up an intimate knowledge over those years, and probably will guarantee to know more about their vehicle than any vehicle inspector giving them more on the fitness. And as can be read from the comments and stories, From the 1,396 respondents, page 18 and page 19 of the report shows they're very, very enthusiastic about. Most owners are members of more than one club. I'm a member of 3 and enjoy getting their vehicles out whenever possible. In fact, a group of us take ours out for lunch if it's fine, one day during the week if we can. From the report, the general public views historic, classic and custom cars favourably and wants to see these vehicles out and about. And also states that the general public express a strong degree of support in recognising and protecting the role of the historic and classic vehicles of New Zealand. So that's about it. I don't know if you have any questions or. Was that it?
No, you've got a couple of minutes for questions, so that's great, Chris. Any questions for Chris?
Oh, come on, someone must have one.
No, okay.
Tell us about a 3-wheel Cadillac.
Hey?
Tell us about a 3-wheel Cadillac.
I don't think we've got time to do that.
Tell us,
Tell us in behind Gary.
Sorry.
I had one, as part of your survey, the question that probably nobody wants to ask is, did you have a system in there so that I couldn't fill in that I belong to 3 different clubs with all my vehicles, so the numbers got increased?
Michael?
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah, if there was within it, you could actually put up to 6 vehicles.
I know what I'm asking, question I'm asking is, did it allow me to enter 3 times for 3 different, because I belong to 3 different, did it lock me out of the name? So I couldn't do 3 entries?
No, I don't think so.
No, it didn't.
yeah, the way that I did that was, because I'm a member of 3 clubs, is that I filled out a separate survey for each of the clubs.
Yeah.
And the vehicles that were specific to those.
That's
Yeah,
what I do.
right, but I
But in the future, what we'll try and do is actually say, how many clubs do you want to respond to, and incorporate that into the main survey.
Yeah, you got some learnings out of this, yeah. Because what I was sort of leading to was I could have filled in 3 times the number of vehicles to what I really own.
Right.
I think they're right. Relying on you're not doing anything.
I didn't do that.
Oh, that's either did I.
I could have done it before.
Did you manage to find?
Our next speaker is David on classics.
Good morning, everybody. My name's David Raisin from the Rover Car Club, and I was tasked with writing the section on modern classics from 1946 to the present day. First of all, I wanted to put that $12.5 billion into perspective, because it's a huge sum of money that I couldn't get my head around. So I had a quick look on search for New Zealand exports. And we can see here that we would actually count as number 2 on the export values list. So we have significant financial clout. And as a result, we've now seen doors opening as a result of it, which you'll hear about later on today. Plus, we contribute massively to tourism. So we need to get those figures out to the general public. I've added the final 2 points as a discussion point. What constitutes a classic car in the first place? They're generally cars that we wanted when they were growing up, and that's why the under 50s aren't showing as much interest in the older cars that we're interested in. But we are seeing more interest in the newer cars, the 1980s cars. And then the final point is, how do we actually use our cars? They're for fun times and for leisure times. Here we see the country of origin and the annual spend. So where are the missing 11% of cars from? And we also see the annual spend, and all I can say is some of you are clearly spending a lot more than I am. The percentages don't really change all that much across the 3 age ranges of classic cars. So how do we draw in the Japanese car enthusiasts? They have a long list of fascinating cars, from the K cars up to the mighty Godzilla. From Korea, Hyundai started exporting cars back in 1975 with the Hyundai Pony, developed by staff that Hyundai poached from British Leyland. And I would have also expected European cars to have a higher percentage as well. Also, how much cross-pollination is there between the various groups, with specific shows such as the British and European shows versus Beach Hop? How many of us actually go to other group shows and learn about their interests? Again, back in the UK, there's growing interest in shows for ordinary cars, with shows such as the Festival of the Unexceptional and the Concours d'Ordinaire. And these were started when local enthusiasts realised that there were less Ford Sierra still on the road than Porsche Turbos. Cars that were once street furniture are now very, very rare. And we need to value those ordinary cars. At Brits at the Beach a few years ago, the car at the show was a Wolseley 2200 that had been meticulously restored, and it was a very worthy winner. And at one of the recent British shows, I think it was Festival of the Unexceptional, the winner was a Proton from the 1980s. Again, a worthy winner. The age of the owners is a worry. We need to get more youngsters involved. What's keeping them from joining us? Is it the cars, and are they only interested in drifting? You can see there that 90% of the owners are in the 50-year plus age group. Is it the clubs? I'm in the Rover Club, and a few years ago at one of our local shows, we decided to flip things around. Under our central large gazebo, instead of the beautifully restored older cars with their please don't touch signs, we put two much newer, ordinary, just everyday modern Rovers, and the older, more obvious show cars were relegated to the periphery of the stand. We had posters asking owners of modern Rovers to talk to us and see if they wanted to join us. We actually had a lot of conversations started as a result. I'll put this slide in as a call to arms. It can be tough to join a car club. How many times do we go to a car show and you see all the owners gathered around in a circle under a gazebo within a circle of cars? The cars have been drawn up, they've circled the wagons, and they've manned the defences. So we need to make club stands more welcoming. They are the shop window to your club, and they need to look like that. They shouldn't need to look like a fortress that's about to be stormed. I'll put this final slide in as another discussion point. These marks were all specifically mentioned in the survey. So I had a look at when did that car make disappear in the last car they made. But those clubs are still going strong. So what's their formula of success when other clubs with newer cars may have fallen by the wayside? Thank you. Any questions?
No questions?
No, for that.
Okay, there you go. You're off the hook, Dave. Okay, our next presenter, which is going to be of a slightly different style, very intriguing, is in the hands of Warren Patterson, New Zealand Hot Rod and Customs.
First question, how fast have you ever been?
Too fast. 140 miles an hour. I'm Warren Patterson. I'm part of the Hot Rod Association. I've been on NZHCVS member for 44 years, president from 13 to 19, and I'm the executive for 28 years. And like I said earlier, I'm just new to FoMC. So our slides are a little bit different in a sense because we're a bit different to all you guys. Because hot rods were frowned upon originally because we got all your old vintage cars and shot them all around. We weren't very popular for a while. What we got up here? So, New Zealand Hot Rod Association's got 106 member clubs. We have 4,100 members, and many hot rods stem from the vintage cars, including the Model T, of which I have a replica Model T bucket. Not one stitch of it is Model T. So, what do we got next? Our hot rods are classified into two classes. So we have pre-1949, which is pretty obvious, mostly bodied cars with guards, and then street machines are all from 1950 through to around about 76, give or take a bit. And the interesting fact here is that 36k plus is the average spend per owner per car. So it's a pretty big large picture and a bigger picture of everything. But then we're a big supporter of charities. A lot of our events around the country, Kumu, Big Chop, Muscle Car Madness, Americana, but a large chunk of their proceeds go back to charities, and these are visited by in excess of 50 to 100,000 people at various events. As I said before, the big picture of the $16.5 billion spend in New Zealand, which is enormous. We have a number of businesses that are hot like things. You see stuff on TV, car builders in America predominantly, and they do all these things for customers. So there's a very big spend, and there's a number of custom car shops in New Zealand. I can name a few, but there's quite a few out there. And with the support of these specialist businesses, you know, these owners are spending, like I say, 36K a year, 21K roughly on classic vehicles, and created, I don't have the number, but there's 5,200 jobs across the motor car industry in New Zealand. Now we're up to, that's it. So just a little bit of history in regards to this turned off.
We'll just push the end of it again. Get some batteries.
Is it
That
better?
one?
We can hear you.
You can hear me? That's all right. It's probably better if you can't. Like I said before, predominantly only vintage cars were stripped down, the guards in their bonnets, etc., to go faster. I did have a slide with some drag racing and stuff on, so we can pop that up. In the early 30s, American enthusiasts had got into drag racing, i.e., who could go the fastest, i.e., Bonneville, El Mirage, and early drag racing in California. Obviously, some earliest hot rods were not just who could go fastest, but who could customize to look the coolest, the most radical, roof chops, channel bodies, aluminium wheels, engines, and early pioneers became hot rod shops for customers. Well, they made comparisons to New Zealand in a sense of versus America. There's Ed Roth is well known for customizing and car and paint. America, some of you may not know Don Gulch or Big Daddy. Drag racing put America on the charts with that. Our equivalent in New Zealand is Garth Hogan with his drag racing exploits in New Zealand. Shirley Muldowney, equally drag racing. Our equivalent in New Zealand, and I had a close relationship with her, is Faye Grant from New Zealand in drag racing. She was the fastest person in the Southern Hemisphere, which I think Karen Hay just took off for about 3 years ago. Boyd Coddington, building cars, all of that type of stuff. Equivalent in New Zealand, and I'm not being just biased, there's a number of good car builders out there, but one of our early ones in New Zealand is John Reed, or JR as he's called, building world class hot rods. And Bill Burke and others, equally belly tank races on the salt and stuff. I personally knew Chris Harris in New Zealand. He unfortunately crashed at Bonneville and ended up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And he was a member of NZHCVS. But these are guys that have equaled the Americans in the stance of how we get around the world concerning hot rods. And some of the pictures there. So, like I said, mine's a little bit different to these other guys, but it's just a little bit of history of us and otherwise. And we, like you, hot rod associations, have become more involved with FoMC in recent years because we're concerned about where New Zealand motoring history and with the regulation changes and stuff are going, that we want to be part of securing our future.
Thanks, Warren.
Any questions?
Any questions of Warren?
Yep.
What's the demographics like? Hot rod pubs. So I mean, do you have a lot of people in the 50 or you know,
I did write a figure down here somewhere. Might be on another page. Average is 50 to 60, but most of them are 60 to 70-year-old plus. And we're experiencing the same struggles that a lot of others are, that the youth is not so much coming through. There's a number of reasons for it. One will be cost, possibly. Two is a shortage of material to buy, like cars. But whereas part of ours is scratch-built cars, and we were integral in the LVV getting set up. back in the day to protect our regulation, because they were looking at removing us from the vehicle fleet in New Zealand. All of those things are, yeah, handbrakes. But I've got 3 cars, I've got 3 kids, but they'll fight over those when I'm gone. And a lot of people are in that boat. That's how their younger ones are getting into the thing. There's some coming through, but I suggest it's a challenge for us all.
Thanks, Warren. Just as Chris has maybe changed the batteries there. In terms of the NZHRA, as an observer, I guess relatively new to the Federation, only been really on board for 2.5 years, whatever it is. The thing that I never realised is the sheer depth of the NZHRA, because we treat them in the 149 clubs who are part of the Federation. They are one club, just like the VCC is one club in the 149. But as you heard in Warren's opening, the NZHRA itself is the umbrella group for 106 or 106 other subsidiary clubs. And that's a huge part of our footprint, but we never really talk about. So that's all part of, I guess, that's embarrassing, isn't it? Sorry. It's a huge part of our footprint, and it's actually a huge part of the survey, as you heard from the numbers. So I just want to say that. And in the room today with us, where's Tony sitting? Tony, we have with us the actual New Zealand president of the NZHRA. So great to have you with us, Tony. And as I say, you're an important piece of what we all do. Thank you. Okay.
Barry, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. The hot rod club's predominantly American cars.
Correct.
We have a whole culture now of high performance Japanese cars with young people, in particular. So the 35-year down age group are mostly targeting Japanese cars. Is there a connection with the customization and the hot rod clubs with those cars?
Not really. Part of it is because even me, I don't consider myself old, but I'm certainly stepping that way. The part of it is that others don't see them as hot rods or the connection to rods. We have a die-hard group who are pre-49 completely.
Yeah.
They don't even recognise really street machine because they don't consider them hot rods. It's just that we have classified that because people drive around in 55 Chevys like I do.
Yeah.
Or otherwise, because that was the start of that era, which is American graffiti.
Yeah.
All of that stuff on TV, which was the exposure to it probably in my lifetime more, which was I think 73 graffiti. How would we get them into that? Good question. We've tried. I don't know how you fit them into it because some of them don't. They have a connection with us because they're also connected in the sense of out outside of the field of your vintage car guys and veterans. Ours is all related around speed, horsepower, modifications and all that stuff. So i.e. the bit I said before about going fast. They're equally in that boat. I've heard that there are some minor groups now get together and they've got a bit of a loose club type thing, but connected to us, no. The challenge. How do you get them involved? Because they are arguably the future. Tony, you're putting me under pressure.
A couple of years ago, I went around our clubs and asked, would you be interested in opening a class of Japanese come on the side? It's not actually as part of us running against us, but beside us. Actually quite lucky to be here. It didn't take nicely. I don't think they need to change. I think we need to change.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Interesting.
I think the Fours and Rotaries are massive. And they put really good shows on. They're world-class cars. That they do everything pretty right. I think NZHRA need to change a bit to let them come in. The way we are at the moment, we won't allow it. I think we need to change a bit to survive.
Yeah. And maybe the and maybe what you're saying there, Tony, is the Federation itself also might need to think about that and where they fit or don't fit. But yeah, interesting discussion. Okay, we'll keep moving on the survey. Thanks, Warren. Great. Really appreciate what you've done. And if you thought that presentation was interesting and thought-provoking, wait for the next one. Here's Murray. We're going to learn about motorcycles.
Good morning, everyone. Murray McLean. I'm president of the North Owners Club.
Murray.
Member Secretary of the AGM Bachelors Club, Secretary of the Positive Earth Motorcycle Club, and a lifetime member of the Nelson Classic and Vintage Motorcycle Club. Next slide, please. Right. The question we ask yourself is, what is a classic motorcycle? And a classic is defined largely by the age of the owner. The person whose first bike, usually their first form of transport, first taste of freedom and independence, will be drawn to that make and model, so as to relive their youth. And the survey estimates 58,900 motorcycles and 3.65 bikes per collector. But I know that some people in this room, like myself, have got way more than that. Restorations. 1/3 of the classic historic motorcycles are classed as being under restoration. In my experience, the British and American models are a more viable restoration proposition due to the fact that models were very similar and used proprietary parts from major suppliers like Lucas, Vernon, Smiths, Amel. Unfortunately, the skills to refurbish these parts are being lost due to the age of the craftsman that can repair them. Next slide. Motorcycle registration. A large proportion of the unregistered machines will be on hold due to the 6-month foreign fitness requirement. The colder weather months also play a large part in this, and the majority of club rallies are held in the summer months. So hopefully we might hear some good news about the efforts to change the warrant of fitness regulations for plus 40-year-old vehicles. Okay, distance travelled. The survey shows us that 662 is the kilometres per year is the average figure. And on that surface, it appears quite low. But with motorcycles taking up less parking space in a car, multiple motorcycle ownership by enthusiasts with an average of 3.65 bikes, each increases the riding distance for about 2,500 kilometres a year. And obviously, the more modern machines they are, the more often they get used. Next slide. Okay, place of manufacture. The graph from the survey shows how connected to New Zealand was to Britain for the imports, with 6% of the classic fleet being of English origin. After Britain joined the EU, New Zealand started trading with Japan, whose product offerings were stylish, reliable, didn't leak oil, disc brakes, electric starts. Next slide. Age of motorcycles. So the graph there showed us that it was divided into 5 groups: 52 and older, 53 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 to 86 and 47 onwards. As you can see there, it works out about 20% per group for the age of motorcycles from the clubs that are in the survey. So in summary, the motorcycle culture in New Zealand is alive and well, with a diverse range of machines and owners. This is our culture. Next slide. New classics. A lot of famous English and American manufacturers that ceased production in the 50s, 60s and 70s are now being reborn. Amongst these are Triumph, Norton, BSA, Matchless, Brush Superior, Royal Enfield, Indian, and AJS, with various degrees of success. Most are coming out of Asian countries where labour is cheaper, but hopefully quality control has not been sacrificed. Time will tell. So, running costs. Motorcyclists are individualists and like to personalise their rides. Restoration and customisation makes up the largest expenditure. Obviously, if the owner can carry out their own repairs and maintenance, the further their dollar goes. Most classic clubs have a rolling eligibility of 25 years. So in today's world, a 1999 machine is club eligible. But this in some ways deters riders from using the older post-vintage machines. That ends my speech. Have you got any questions?
Yeah, how fast is the fastest you've been on a motorcycle? And was it the Poop Maxi we saw?
It wasn't the Poop Maxi, although I must confess my first motorcycle wasn't Poop. I paid $40 for it, had it for 3 days and blew it up. Who's English bikes out there? That picture there is by Norton that I've imported from America. That's out the desert in Utah. And I'm back over there on Friday for a 6-week free motorcycle rally adventure on a very similar commando. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Murray. And our next speaker really needs no introduction. Harry Duynhoven, vintage machinery, agricultural, and all sorts of interesting things.
Good morning again, everyone. Well, I've got sort of the forgotten sector, if you like, because for many of us, we don't sort of think about the vintage machinery clubs, the vintage speedway clubs, and the historic military vehicles. They're sort of off to the side of it from mainstream of classic and vintage cars. And this morning I'm asking Laurie Callender from the Taranaki Vintage Speedway Club and Lou Skelton from the historic military vehicles club to come up and help me. But when we think about it, many of us will have been to many events and shows where there's vintage machinery. And that might run from traction engines and steamrollers, literally steamrollers, to tractors, farm machinery, stationary engines, all sorts of road making equipment, all sorts of different machinery, ranging from the tin mill. That's one of the sort of iconic bits of gear that the Taranaki Vintage Machinery Club have got. It's a threshing plant, basically. Through the vintage generators, all sorts of historic machinery housed and beautifully kept around the country, and many of it's in its original condition and just kept running. Obviously, most of this activity is off-road, so we don't have much in the way of data, because a lot of our data is based on registration sources, mileages, NZTA data, etc. So a lot of us, when we think about the sort of brand names and the historic military vehicles, we think about the vehicles that the New Zealand Army had. And some years ago, when my father died, one of his last wishes was to go, and he was in the Dutch Army, and was to go on his last journey in the vehicle that he learned to drive in, which was a shared version of the very familiar snub-nosed army truck. And I thought, where are those in New Zealand? Because to my knowledge, we didn't have them. And the Military Vehicle Club were amazing. They said, oh, yeah, it was a bloke in Taranaki that's just about finished one of those. What? And it was ex-Canadian. And of course, the Dutch Army had a whole lot of ex-Canadian gear, which is why my father learned to drive a shed version of the snub-nose. So it's amazing what's here. And some years ago, I visited a military vehicle collection, and there in the middle of it was a Maybach, beautiful, I think, V12 engine, half track. And there's all sorts of stuff around New Zealand. But let's hear from Lou to talk for a minute or so about that. Lou, would you like to come and join us up here?
Yeah, so I'm Lou Skelton. So I think like I didn't join the military vet club for quite a while, and when I did, they made me the local area rep. I think that's how it is. I think I'm the youngest by a pretty long yardstick, but once I came from as our, as the rep from Rob Monson and Milton Lumsden, they've been part of the FoMC for quite some time now. Looking into the report, I'll choose my words wisely, we've got a very old membership or older generation, being 60 to 80. So a lot of those projects likely to be moved on to either family or, like was said earlier, there's some pretty rare machines here in New Zealand. They fetch pretty big money. Our weather's better than overseas, so a lot of that stuff's well picked over. From the, we don't tell our wives, but we've normally got between 4 vehicles. That's pretty much just depends on the size of your shed and how many vehicles you've got hidden at friends' places. And they, like just like I said before, you know, some of us are into motorbikes as well as jeeps, as well as trucks, as well as track vehicles and tanks and stuff like that. There's you know, you don't see much of the big shows that we do in the public eye, because no one can be like the health and safety plan for 30 odd tanks zooming around the paddock. So but we do have a good get together every year. Right, the average case from the survey, 519 Ks. Myself, just over Christmas, I did 1,200 miles just in my Jeep to get to it around top of the South Island and did a bit of cross country. It was quite good fun. But the other blokes a lot wealthier than me, they seem to get out. We had a bunch of Americans come over. There was 30 trucks. There's RL Bedfords. There was even some old bus. Didn't even know what the hell it was, but it was painted green. They did like a 2-week trip of the South Island. But they started in Hamilton. So there's just like no one, like they say, no one pays for the, they don't camp in camping grounds in a tent, because they like to have a bed and a jug and a hottie and stuff. So, you know, accommodation plus fuel to run these big machines is, you know, it all feeds back into the economy. I would make a note. Most of the restos, they're starting to be more barn finds. Well, that's where they start. They normally end up still back at the shed. The ones that are on road, most of them are, well, the ones that are on road are often rejoined and used. Most of the members, despite their age, they're looking to still take on more projects. It's just some blokes, they won't see them finished, but they see it as doing their bit for the preserving New Zealand military history. And they'll either get moved on to family, or, you know, the family will fight over them and see it as a massive investment they can put back in their pockets. Why do people get into military vehicles? You might think we're nuts. History buffs. Some people are into machine guns, and they want to have a Jeep to put their machine guns on. To, you'd be surprised. Used to transport veterans around for Anzac Day, that sort of thing. And other fellas, that's just the difference between men and boys is the size of their toys. They used to do it the 1-3-5 scale, and now it's 1-to-1 scale. Got up in Taranaki, what's his name? He's had an old artillery gun, a 25-pounder. Restored that, it was naked. Restored that, it was like, what do I do next? So we got a truck and restored that, and it's like, I need a trailer to put all the ammunition into. Not the fires it. So he imported a trailer from Belgium. So it just goes on and on. What was it? My last note was, we might sound bonkers, but at least we're not collecting fire engines.
Lou has referred to Malcolm, our former president, who was very fond of large military vehicles, and particularly ones that go bang on a regular basis. Laurie Calendar, I want to come up for just a minute and tell you a little bit about Purchase Speedway. We're a very healthy club in the Taranaki, and there are others around. And just recently we had a day where not only did we have Speedway, but we also had a Stewart tank, which is a rear-engined, air-cooled, radial-powered tank. Brig gun carrier and a variety of other military equipment, all exercising on the same day, was a foul day, but it was great fun. Laurie.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, Laurie Campbell is my name, from the Taranaki Historic Speedway. We formed a group in 2022, basically around the Waiwakaio Speedway that some of you may have heard about, which went from 1951 to 1970. We've got over 120 members and probably about 60 vehicles that lying around in sheds. We also get them out and have runs. As Harry said, it was a wet day, so we didn't get a chance, but we used the Speedway New Zealand tracks in Stratford. Plus we have our own little track on a private piece of land. Auckland is very similar, based around Western Springs. They've probably got 200 plus cars, midget sprint cars, TQs, that type of thing. They've got their own track at Mary. Christchurch also is another club with very equivalent numbers of vehicles. And there's also two groups of historic stock cars in New Zealand. And stock car racing is sort of the other end of the spectrum, if you like. So you've got bikes, TQs and midgets, and then you've got the stock cars as well. So overall, there's a huge number of historic race vehicles out there. And I just want to make a point that whilst the survey was quite good, it confused me a little bit because, you know, I started collecting, I've got 2 Speedway vehicles, 3 vintage BMX motorbikes, Formula 3 race cars, 7 mountain goats that my father beated in my museum, which has got the value of over $90,000 worth of stuff in it. But I couldn't find anywhere in the survey to actually include my private museum. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well. You people are probably the same. I mean, all these people that have got vintage Speedway vehicles, they've probably got more than one. And they sit in sheds most of the time. Not all of them get out for runs. Most of them are used for display purposes and show and things like that.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Laurie.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Harry. And then the final sector across the Federation that you're going to hear from this morning is motorhome and caravan. And Peter. Thanks, Peter.
Well, I get to do tailing Charlie's story of my life, really. But yes, so I represent the Motor Caravan Association, and one of the interesting facts about it was established in 1956 by a guy called Andy Anderson, and the picture that was on the initial thing there is a 1928 Rio, which was originally a bus, and it was converted after it had done about 700,000 miles into a motor caravan. And it's a very small club in those days, but it has built now into an organisation with about 140,000 members. So it's a pretty big group. About 25% of Federation members are also members of the Caravan Association, or at least own a caravan or a motorhome. And it's interesting because it shows that we're not just single-minded and that we like motor vehicles, but we also enjoy our outdoors and camping. And of the 9,000 odd NZHCVS members, approximately half were motorhomes or caravans. So it's because there's different people find motorhomes or caravans more suited to the type of camping that they like to do. So the types of vehicles that we're involved in, average value of a bit over 92,000, is made up motorhomes, probably the most expensive, and nowadays they seem to have just gone through the roof. It's nothing to pay now for a luxury motorhome, $300,000-400,000 dollars, whereas the caravans are probably more likely to be well over 100,000. We've still got plenty of camper vans as well, because they're a little bit narrower, but easier to manoeuvre, not as long usually, and average value around about 60,000. There's still a lot of the old school bus conversions around. It's just surprising how many you do see, and a lot of those people are using them for a living, but they still move around the country doing casual labouring or whatever. And there's also been quite a growth in American style fifth wheel motorhomes, towed either by a truck or a very large ute. And then we've got a whole mishmash of other kinds of vehicles as well. So it's quite a broad base that we've got. I'll make a nice slide go down page next. So yes, we spend a lot of money out on in the society, I guess you'd say, and that's because we spend quite a lot of time away. Average use about 115 nights, but that varies quite a bit between different uses, and you find that vans are probably out on the road a lot more. And we spend on average around about 4,500 a year on our travel expenses. And one of the things that we have established is with cities is what they call motorhome friendly towns. And they're the sort of places that encourage us to come in and camp, sometimes in their city streets. And but they know that every time a group of motorhomes or caravans come into their area, they're going to spend money in their community. And so if you think about an average spend of a bit over 4,500, and probably around about 80,000 active motorhome or caravan owners, you're talking about an awful lot of money that's being spent in the community. So what's our next one? Yeah, I think we're just about there, aren't we? What was the last one? Oh, yes. So yeah, we're traveling lost in place now. Just here. Okay. So yeah, camper vans are obviously the highest users, of average about 20,000, and motorhome is just under 14,000, and some of the bus owners are a bit more static, and caravans is a bit hard to measure, but the survey established about 5,500 each. So just to sort of summarise, I suppose, right now we've got this silly split between light and heavy vehicles at the moment. In recent years, with the increase in the importing of European style motorhomes that are based on light truck or light van chassis, we've now got this situation where two very similar vehicles, one can be light vehicle, one can be heavy, And the new light vehicle is on a warranty fitness, has a 3-year inspection term for the first 3 years. A brand new motorhome has to have an inspection after 6 months. So that's a major issue from the NZMCO perspective, to try and also establish a much more realistic inspection term. And so, you know, for the last 4 or so years, we've been trying to get the officials to recognise that that's not sensible. So, do I have any questions on motorhomes or caravans?
Any questions of Peter? All okay? One point I'll clarify for you, because the question even got asked in our executive group yesterday. In the $16.5 billion footprint of the historic and classic sector, that does not include any of the numbers you've heard from Peter with regard to motorhome and caravan. So we did this, they were in the survey, they got asked questions, we got that data because the MCA is an integral part of the federation, but the actual title and subject of the survey is not the federation's footprint, it's the whole of the historic and classic vehicle sector. So in $16.5 billion, it does not include the value of motorhome and caravans, it does not include their annual expenses and costs on the road. That's over and above again.
So ballpark, what's that figure?
I haven't worked out the value. If you take, what do you say, 80,000 motorhomes and caravans at an average price of 90,000 each, do the numbers. It's a huge number. If you take their annual cost of what they spend on their vehicle in terms of servicing expenses, plus what they spend on the road, it's about $8,500 per vehicle times 80,000. It's about
468 million.
468 million, making a fraction higher.
Half a billion.
$500 million.
Yeah.
Just that they spend on the road in the economy, particularly regionally. Yeah.
Annually.
But it's not in the 16.5 billion. So huge numbers that are sitting in this room, if you like, that we're all responsible for. Okay.
Yes, and we don't have the same multiple ownership generally as
Yes, one caravan.
Hey, thanks, Peter. Round. Okay, you've now heard from all of the sectors. My role now is to sort of do a bit of a wrap up and some other aspects of the survey to bring it to life, and then I want to sort of conclude on my words with where we all fit, whether it's federation or individual clubs, to actually continue to tell the story. So I'll try and do this. This might take between 10 and 12 minutes or so. Then we're going to move on to Warren's Fitness and give you an update on that. And we're aiming for a lunch break just sometime after, between 12 and 12:15. Chris Butler has played a game. You'll be here and put a car up there on screen. Do you want to just go back? Did you want me to tell the story of that? I reckon. You want to tell me? Yeah. That was my darling's car. My wife Loretta fell in love many years ago. Wanted a yellow convertible. It's not necessarily a Mustang. A Ferrari was actually the first in the wish list as we were living at that stage in Johannesburg, and Ferraris were everywhere, and a yellow 360 looked pretty nice. Anyway, cut a long story short, we saw a yellow Mustang one day, 06, which is the only year Ford ever did a yellow Mustang owned in Auckland. Anyway, this is 2019. Pressed the button, Lorette went onto eBay, bought the car at a Ford dealership in Seattle. It was the second Mustang we'd imported, so we knew the ropes. Anyway, it was Loretta's car. It's a Celine, which is a special edition, high horsepower, 400 horsepower. It's not supercharged, suspension, big wheels, body kits, the whole bit. And it was her pride and joy. And it's still with me today. And we're only showing it not because it's my car, but there's a Federation flag under the front of it. Okay, that's the Cromwell car show in January of this year. Sadly, Loretta is no longer with us, but the car is a very special piece of who I am. Okay, I'm just going to wrap this up pretty quickly, but I just want to, I guess, highlight what to me are some pretty key pieces. I think you also referred earlier to the wider piece of this about the public at large. And that's the first piece I really just want to emphasize. What came out of that public survey, one of many facts, but one of them, 47% of New Zealand households, 47% of households in New Zealand go to a motoring event or a museum or some form of, gathering, which we're all part of. 47% do that once a year. When the question was asked, it then said, if you haven't done it, have you done it in the last year or more? Another 29% said yes, they had. So in round numbers, 75% of New Zealand households go to a museum, car museum, go to an event, whatever it may be, stand on the corner and watch a run go by, whatever it might be, but they are engaged in some way or another, at least in the last 2 years or so, which just says we've got a lot of reach into the community. On top of that, the public at large were asked the question, when you do this, as a household, what's your average annual expense, what you spend on this? And there's the number, $259 per household. Whether that was I don't know, going down the road or fuel cost to get to an event, wherever it might be the Caroline Bay, Rock and Hop and Timaru or whatever it was, or it's going to Richardson's Museum or Southwest Museum, whatever it is, the average household spends $259. If you multiply that out by the households across New Zealand within our 5 million people, it actually adds up to $400 million. And that's in the 16.5. That is part of that big 16.5. Thanks, Chris. We also, coming out of our early work on the survey and coming out of some of our early executive discussions over the last 18 months to 2 years, one of the areas where we believe we need to push harder on, possibly, or push hard on, no criticism intended there, is around where historic and classic cars fit as part of our heritage. So knowing that we were going to head in that direction, we put questions into the survey to try and get some, data around that and whatever. The interesting piece, and there are a number of different questions that were asked in different ways, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers now, they're all in the documents that are out there. But in round terms, 76% of all New Zealanders, New Zealand at large, believe that historic and classic vehicles are an important part of New Zealand's unique character and our culture. And then, as I say, that's backed up with other numbers around, they see it as an important part of our heritage and so on and so forth. We also took that another stage at the hands of our research agency and the head researcher, who was just so good in all of this. He said, let's take that one stage further. Let's do the temptation exercise. And again, I won't try and describe it in detail, but the public at large were asked the question. Here are 19 different classic and historic vehicle categories, if you like. So there was a restored Model T, there was a classic Camaro, there was all sorts of things. There were vintage, right across all of our sectors. So there was a vintage truck. I can't swear that there was a vintage tank in there, Harry, or Lou, but there certainly was vintage tractors, and there was everything. And they were asked the question, if circumstances were right and favourable for you, would any of these vehicles be in your garage? If so, which one would you particularly be interested in having if the circumstances suited your, helped you do it? And the end result was 26% of the people at large, right across New Zealand, would love to have a historical classic car in their garage. And it varied within the numbers, as you can see there. Sadly, vintage trucks and tractors were only at 7%. A whole range of vehicles, such as Mini Coopers and Holden Monaros and whatever else was in that, in those different categories, all averaged around 30%. And in fact, when they got shown a photo of a Porsche 911 or a right-hand drive Mustang, whatever what the researcher called it, a modern classic, that number even jumped up to over 40%. The average was 28%. of New Zealanders would love to have one of our cars in their garage. If nothing else, that should be good for resale value, and holding values up. Other pieces of this, the museums and the private collections, we wanted to get into the survey. We researched the museums directly, all of the leading museums in New Zealand. That was done through the research company. We found another way, strictly confidential and below the radar line, really, to do a survey of private collections. And those numbers are into the survey. If you jump down to the private collections and the fine print at the bottom, our estimate, using again the research company's judgment, because we sampled from memory 45 or 50, I think, private collections across New Zealand. And then out of that, we extended the data through the research guys. The estimate is that there's somewhere between 275 or over 300, somewhere in that ballpark, private collections across New Zealand of varying scales and size. The averages you see there is, we think, between $4 and $5 million per collection, average. I know one collection that I personally surveyed, which was $40 million, private collection. So it's all, there's a lot of variation, but we try to get our arms around the numbers. And again, these numbers are in the 16.5, the footprint we have in New Zealand. In terms of the public at large, 25% of the New Zealand households, public at large, said to us in the survey they have visited one car museum in the last 12 months. We didn't ask them which one, but we took their word for it. The question was very clear. When you look at that across the Federation members, you know what we're like. We average 6 museums a year, whether that be on car runs or holidays we do or whatever. So, yeah, thanks, Chris. And this is part of those other numbers I talked about a moment ago in terms of history and heritage. I mean, again, it's in all the material you've seen, but the consistent number in there is 70% of New Zealanders at large truly believe that what we do is important with regard to heritage and history in New Zealand, and it needs to be preserved and it should be recognised. When we communicated with government, as the new ministers were announced after the election, traditionally, as you know, we go to the Minister of Transport and all of those, set them profile of who the Federation is and what we want, whatever. For the first time, we've now added the Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage onto our mailing list. That they got a copy of the survey. Their copy of the survey had a yellow highlight line through these numbers and said, we want to talk with you at some stage in the future. Now, we haven't yet had that meeting. We haven't had an acknowledgement from Paul Goldsmith, Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, from him and his people. They've got the data. They understand it. We're yet to meet with them, but we'll keep pushing on that. That's that. Last of these particular slides, the economic impact. We've talked about this a few times. You see the numbers there. I won't go through them in detail. That number here, I think Warren touched on that. To the best, again, that we could get through the research, and this part of the research was a bit challenging, but we best estimate 5,200 specialist skills and trades people, full-time jobs across the sectors as best we can judge them. It's probably higher, but again, that number is built into the 16.5. And we think that is actually a conservative number. Total footprint, as we said, 16.5 billion. Okay, last 2 words from me, really, or last couple of points. What you see, I guess, in summary terms, this is the first ever time we've done the survey. And it's made us, I think, all of us, you know, stand up and recognise the numbers. I think there's this feeling of pride, correct? We're actually worth more, we're bigger, we're substantial, and you see in particular that the public at large opinion is hugely supportive, which again is the point. I'm glad that you picked up that too. The other point I would say, and I guess it's a bit of a personal opinion, but I'll share it. We live in times of challenge and change. And we see that all around, whether it's political, whether it's social. You know, some of us in the room are connected into local government as well, and sitting in a local government council these days as a councillor is a very different experience than what it was even only 15 years ago. We live in times of change and challenge. And the point is the way I see it, is like somewhat personally, but the executive, I think we're all on the same page. The survey itself is an asset and a tool for us at exactly the right time for us to put our message forward. And it strengthens our hand, as you see there, our interaction with government. We'll talk in a moment, Harry and I, about warrants of fitness and where we're going on that. It supports, I think, what we can do as clubs. I'll come back to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. As I said a moment ago, it was referred to by a number, including Michael in his intro words and others since. The heritage story that comes out of this gives us a whole new push. And I mentioned the minister a moment ago, which is what we're going to do, and obviously the economic contribution. So the last slide that I really want to, I've left it to the last deliberately, and I'm just a club member as well, like all of you here, an active member in the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club, and clubs are interesting, and they have their own dynamics and characters and ways of doing things. The point I want to register with you here today, and we'll do it by email and whatever to all the other clubs who aren't at the AGM. I'm saying it personally, we, the Federation, really want you to get in and go further than you probably have already in pushing the survey. It doesn't have a shelf life. Yet when we get to next year, it might look a little outdated because it's 2024 and all the rest of it. But right now, it's current. All of the stuff we've heard this afternoon, whether it's 16.5 billion or all the other stories you've heard, it's all relevant. And I'm asking you to find ways as clubs to go the extra mile to get the message out there. Whether that's with local media, whether it's in Facebook and social media, when I say earlier local media, I'm talking mainstream media, get it in, and particularly into social media. I would love to think that as a club, you've sent a communication to all of your members about the survey and sort of a summary of the top 10 points or whatever it might be, so an individual club member can understand it and grasp it. But then you put the links into that message of where it sits on the Federation website. And then you put in bold letters in that email, as a member of our XYZ car club, whoever we are, please, if you're on Facebook, share the story. Put the links into your Facebook post and share it with your friends. Because that would just drive the message right across New Zealand. The story, and I only heard this on Thursday last week. I've been on this wavelength for a while, but on Thursday I heard a story. Any of you in the room know of a dealership in North Canterbury called Waymack Classic Cars? Have you ever had any? Okay. Waymack Classic Cars have 70,000 followers on their Facebook page. 70,000. Jasmine McAuliffe, who's the owner of Waymack Classic, is a passionate supporter of the Federation and what we're doing and the survey. He's already done 4 posts since November last year when we first published the data on their Facebook page, almost the same message, but every 2 months you could just refresh it a little and repost it on the survey results. And he uses that page with all the numbers on it, puts it out there to 70,000 people, and puts his comment or story, if you read this, or if you haven't, you shouldn't do, or whatever the words are he uses, but they push it through social media. Every one of our clubs, every one of our members should do the same. Now, the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club hasn't done it yet either, so don't worry, I haven't been successful there either. They're getting onto it, I think, but I put that message and I guess that plea out to you. You okay there? So my final words, I want to say thanks to Michael and Chris, particularly in by remote control to Glasshouse Consulting, the research company, for doing what they've done. Getting the survey into our hands, and turned out The results exceeded our expectations. We won't get to do it again for whatever it is. Some of us might say sooner than 5 years, but 5 years is probably the reality. So we need to make the most of it now. So I really implore you to do so, and we'll follow this message up to all of our clubs in the coming weeks. Okay, happy. Any questions before I hand over to Harry for warrants of fitness?
Yeah, just one quick comment, which came from the guy who does work on my old car, and he told me that he said, has there been any work to pull together into this? All the companies that are in fact doing restoration work and doing custom car make work, those specialist companies are really unique right through New Zealand, and they're done here, there, and everywhere. And I think it's something that the Federation should actually follow as an extra group, because I believe that they, as a registered group associated with the club, is important to have, because it's given access, again, the breadth of people.
I thought it fully agree, and thank you for raising it. Two quick answers to that. They are in the survey, but the sample that was used was relatively small. And there were a number of reasons for that. We had a database that we were working with of something like 200 or maybe 250, 300 suppliers, restorers, customs aid, across everything. We used the pages of Petrolhead magazine particularly to get names of companies and all the rest of it. For a number of different reasons, our response rate from that survey was good enough to give us some high-level data. The 5,200 full-time employees we talked about, that came from those results. But the reality is, as we surveyed it, for various reasons, we didn't go out over as many people. The response rates were lower than we would have liked, but we accepted that and moved on. It is an area we'd lift again next time round. Secondly, though, we have got it actually on our radar screen that we might, again, if we've got the money to do it at some stage in the near future, we might even do a specialist survey of exactly what you're talking. So it's on the radar screen. Thirdly, the reason why I met with Jasmine McCullough, he came to me last week, he wanted to talk about enhancing skills training and development and recognition and job enhancement and holding on to people in all of those businesses, and what could the Federation do to help. So that's another whole area in our work stream. We'll see it this afternoon that we want to get into. So it's on the radar screen. Thank you.
I was just going to quickly reinforce what I heard from that was, let's find a way to get these 5,200 people into a group that then becomes part of NZHCVS.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And we might even find it through that process, it's actually a whole lot more than 5,200, which lifts the whole story.
Because even though you say that's a conservative number, the fact is that 5,200 is declining by at least 10% a year as people retire.
Yes, you were correct. And the point that was being made at the Thursday conversation is we don't have the mechanisms to be bringing the new people in and holding on to them and so on and so forth. So good question. Okay,